as Bruce has suggested, it's important to have a strategy, and it's important to have a reality check as well. Your strategy is implemented within a specific context, however, and context always trumps behaviors. That's just a way of saying that you can have the best of intentions but fail to get the results that you want because you have not taken something seemingly irrelevant into account. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you were promoted to a new responsibility in your work, and you've worked in this particular institution for the last 10 or 15 years. You discover that you're going to have on your new team persons who used to work with you 10 years ago when you were younger, less experienced, and responsible for a different position requiring different skill sets. Because they had a different view of you, these coworkers might have an incorrect current assessment of you based on their past experience with you. That assessment that they have of you can be limiting to you and your relationship. And so it's wise to somehow eliminate that gap between their assessment of you and current reality. Because if you don't close that gap, you're probably going to be seen for what you were, and that may block you from achieving the current goals and objectives that you have in your current position. So these questions that are before you on the slide become the questions that you need to focus on prior to the work that Bruce has talked about. How are you currently viewed by your larger organization? Not only you personally, but how is your position viewed? Is it viewed as valuable, as important? And what is the criteria from the different stakeholders for what it means to be valuable and important? What part of the reputation of your department or your position or you personally needs to be changed? Do you need to have some conversations with people who might have an influence on whether or not your position is seen as relevant? What are the shared interests that you have with your larger organization? What do they want that you can want for them? And what do you want that they can want for you? What is your current strategy for strengthening or changing that perspective? And all of this may need to happen before we proceed. But it's something that, as Bruce suggested, is an ongoing, continual kinds of questioning, and for us to be focused on as we continue the work that we do. Well, having taken some time to focus on the current context and how you personally and how your position is viewed by your organization and the various parties therein, it's time to get some clarity around how you and the position you occupy within your organization are connected to the goals and objectives of the larger institution or organization of which you're a part. When I worked internally for NASA, some of my customers were responsible for writing funding proposals, but unfortunately had a dismal record of winning any money because they failed to show the connection of their specific technical work to that of the larger agency. Moreover, they couldn't articulate that connection because they didn't know it. And so my job became one of wanting to create a simple way for them to do so. A simple way for them to not only know the connection and direct line of what they did to the overall vision of the organization, but also a simple way for them to communicate that. And it got me to thinking about my own position. And so the chart before you is what I came up with to not only help them, but to help me. And so you'll see at the top of the chart the name of the position that I occupied. To the left of the main triangle, the President's Management Agenda, which was the overarching vision and objective. To the right of that was NASA's strategic plan, the specific agency that I worked for. And then in the middle there, you'll see Strategic Human Capital Plan, which was the plan that I worked under in my Department of Training. Underneath that large triangle, you'll see 5 basic areas that I was responsible for. And I needed to ask questions about what was I doing and what value was I producing for each of those 4 things across the top: strategic alignment through the performance culture, and then undergirding it all, the leadership area. So I want to call your attention to the handouts that you'll find number 1 and 2. And turn to these attachments. You'll find that they are green and yellow, and they say at the top, my personal traceability. 2. And what we're going to have you do later during the time between this session and the next session is to fill this out for you, for your organization and position. And so I want to move to these 2 charts and help you look at it for yourself, not just looking at how I did this for me, but how you could create this kind of simple traceability for yourself. So you'll see that I basically have genericized this on the attachments. And looking toward the left, you'll see these are the questions that you would need to ask for the overall arching organization that you are a part of. What are the vision and values? How do you personally and directly foster corporate vision and values for your organization? Over on the right, what are your organization's strategic plan objectives? And what are you doing to promote or foster it in 2 or 3 or 4 bullets that you could put into this chart? You'll see that attachment number 2 is a blank sheet that's very similar to attachment number 1. Attachment number 1 has the questions that you are going to respond to. Attachment number 2 is the place where you can put your personal responses to. So the kinds of questions that you would ask in terms of your core work might include, what are your specific tasks? What are the projects that you're involved in? The services that you provide? The connections and outputs and outcomes that Bruce spoke about previously. You might be looking at how you align with the purpose, vision, values of the organization in your particular responsibility. So you might want to ask, what specifically are you doing? The reason why you are there in that position, the reason why your position even exists, and what are the capabilities that you are using and making manifest. I have found that for most organizations, the 5 areas that I've listed, which are different than the ones that I have listed for my previous position, the ones that I think are pretty common to all organizations are the ones that I've listed here. You'll find them in the green zone with the white lettering: strategic alignment, shared interests, customer value, the competencies and capabilities required, and overarching all of those as foundational issues are the outcomes, the performance, and the results. So what? What makes this position and what makes your activity successful, significant, sustainable? What do you mean by these 3 S's? successful, significant, sustainable? What are your personal intentions for your work and the outcomes that you hope to achieve? Are your actions consistent with your intention? And what is your communication strategy for explaining what you do? As I mentioned previously, you're going to have an opportunity to personally track your position and responsibilities during the homework time between this session and the next one in August for session 2 of this webinar. The intent of this chart is to show my personal traceability of the position that I held, the work that I did, and you'll see in this chart the responses to the previous charts in terms of the questions that were asked in that yellow and green chart. This is what is Lee's connection? What is Lee's traceability? And so you'll see under President's Management Agenda, these were 3 bullets that I pulled out from that large document of the PMA that seemed to connect with the specific role and the specific tasks that I was given in my position, to focus on immediate results, to develop competencies for future responsibilities, and succession planning. Those were 3 things that were mentioned in the PMA, among many other things, but these were things that seemed to connect and that I could trace back my particular responsibility to the overarching PMA. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see the NASA strategic plan, and I did the same thing there. In looking at that 3-year plan, what were some of the specific things that were mentioned that had to do with my personal position and what I personally accomplished and was tasked with? So under these particular areas that were basically chosen for me from the Strategic Human Capital Plan, which was what my purpose in being was, those 5 things were the strategic alignment, strategic competencies, learning, performance culture, and leadership. These are my personal responses to the questions from the previous charts that were yellow and green that we just went over. Now I invite you to take attachments 3 and 4, the red and gray attachments that you had sent to you, and they are entitled Position Description and Institutional Alignment. One is darker red, the other is lighter pink red. Continuing with the chart that you see on the slide, you see that I specifically put down my responses. But on the attachment number 3, Position Description and Institutional Alignment, you'll see number 3 are the questions that you need to look at to fill out attachment 4. So these are basically the same, although attachment 3 has questions for you to reflect on and then mark down on attachment 4. So you'll see that you're going to put your position title and the current date that you're dealing with this, the organization and or leader's vision or values and their definition of effectiveness would go in the triangle to the top left. The organization's strategic plan, what does the organization intend to accomplish, keywords or phrases, just like I did on the chart that's on your screen, you would do something similar with attachment 4. Because not all of you, obviously, are working under the President's Management Agenda. And some of you may work for organizations or agencies that are fairly unclear about what their strategic plan is or what their organization sees as the important objectives. Others of you work for companies, healthcare systems that are very, very specific about that. So I put it in a more generic way on attachment 3 and 4 that you may, instead of the PMA, you may just want to put your organization's objectives, or if the organization doesn't have specific objectives, your leader probably has criteria for their conditions of satisfaction of what they expect you to do. That's where you would put that in the top left corner. Also on the right-hand side, on attachment 4, you would be looking at your organization's strategic plan. If there is no strategic plan, then I'd encourage you to look if they have a website, if you have a website, if you have newsletters that give you a clue as to what your leader is thinking, what they feel is important, to somehow articulate what it is that your organization, through its leadership, feels is the important competency, the important task before it. And then in the top, the middle large triangle, to answer the questions: why was this position created? What is its rationale, the reason it exists? What needs does this position fill? What does relevancy look like for this position? And if you ask the question, well, how would I know? I don't know. That's my problem. I don't know what relevancy looks like. Then I think that to take on an attitude of curiosity and to look through those newsletters, those statements that your employer, your leader, your CEO, your administrator, look at public and private communication that give you an idea of what's important to them, how the organization's leader might define importance or value or relevancy. And to put those kinds of phrases in the pink triangle at the top of attachment 4. And then you'll see the corresponding areas, the 4 corresponding areas: strategic alignment, shared interests, customer value, competencies, and capabilities. And the foundation for all of that are the outputs, outcomes, the performance, and results, so that we are continuously moving toward creating an evidence-based culture that Bruce so ably told you about. To answer the questions, obviously, on what your thinking is first, you may even want to have some conversations with colleagues, with some of the stakeholders, with the secondary customers that Bruce mentioned, to get an understanding from their point of view of how other people view your position or the value that you bring to the organization. The purpose of all this is to drilling out and reflecting about these kinds of questions, is to clarify how each of us can leverage and communicate the outcomes and the value that we bring to our job and to the agency for which we serve and work.